Good afternoon. I'm Lori Sundberg. I'm the president of Kirkwood Community College. I would like to welcome you to the Iowa Ideas Conference. The Iowa Ideas Conference is in its fourth year, and it's an important opportunity to gather Iowans around a common experience. Really, now more than ever, we commit to providing opportunities for every Iowan to be part of this experience. 2020 is a year that none of us could have predicted. Yet in true Iowa Ideas fashion, we see this year as an opportunity to raise up the issues that will bring us a stronger tomorrow. Kirkwood is honored to support the Iowa Ideas Conference. It's a great example of partnering with others in our community to bring a terrific conference to our state and to Iowans. Enjoy the conference.
Early childhood program is often only part-time. How does this, pose challenges for working parents, and what might some solutions be?
Certainly transportation is a problem. That one, comes to mind very quickly, but also it's a problem on the provider side as well to sustain their business, trying to allow for part-timers, full-timers, keeping within the numbers that you can serve, and that type of thing also. As Shanell said, the before and after school care and things it really takes a lot of partnerships to be able to do that. And I know that, solutions might be in our next phase, but certainly transportation and challenge to the providers are two very large ones.
What we're trying to do is also share where successes are happening. So, some school districts, because of how it works, are partnering and are helping with that transportation. I mentioned Early Childhood Iowa local boards. Some of those boards have set aside funds to help with transportation so that child can get from here to there. I think some other ones, and this kind of goes along what Jillian was sharing, is we know that developmentally, continuity is so important for those children. And so we're trying to support that continuum with continuity in the person that is working and supporting and teaching that child. So there is definitely multiple strategies, and there are more than one answer to that question. And we just encourage people to keep seeing what are your assets that you have here, and who do you need at the table to have the conversation to addressing those issues that you just said, as far as, okay, this is only a part-time. How do we help those parents that are working?
This is the beauty of having the Early Childhood Iowa at the local level, because each of the communities has their own system of supports, whether it's public transportation or a church that has some type of transportation, or the school district. And so we talk a lot about public and private partnerships, and this is where it's good to have those local conversations with people that are working in childcare and the school system and your health system and all those, to figure out, where can we pair our resources together to alleviate the problems that we in our community identified. And it's not always just a rural issue, but transportation is a larger one for those areas.
I feel like we're kind of talking about access here. And Gail had another question about going back to the coronavirus and not being able to be in person. What are some challenges families are having, maybe not having technology or Wi-Fi to receive virtual services?
Beyond that, I think there's the challenge of just trying to stay employed, depending on where the families are working. Even with businesses with very liberal work at home policies, I have seen things where you can't be the primary caregiver if you're going to work at home for your business and still be at home. So I think that it's very unique to the family's employment and their situation, whether they have supports beyond the technology, whether they can be at home, whether they have the background, whether they speak English to receive instruction, or English to give that back to the child. Those are very different translation skills. And I can let Shanell talk more about it. I don't want to monopolize the question, but beyond the technology issue of having up-to-date technology and troubleshooting, there's just being able to have that person in the home to help.
I want to go back to something that Jillian shared earlier that I think also helps. It's an indirect as far as for parents, but for them having the resources that they need to have their child have a spot to go for childcare. If and again, that's a true issue because of COVID. One of the things that we have seen really successful that we are funding and supporting in our state with DHS, education and ECI funds is consultation. And so even though that consultation is helping the center, the preschool, those environments, in an indirect way, that's what's helping those parents, especially to access the information that they need. So it could be a child care consultant assisting, and then finding the resources that they need. In my community, we have a local business that's our internet provider, our phone provider, that kind of thing. They are partnering with the school and the child care center in our community to help those parents that need the technology that they need. So again, it's having that, you have to have a really conversation about, this is our community. How do we all address these needs? And then having those parents feel empowered to have their voice, to say, here's what I need. And then saying, okay, church community, business community, education community, childcare, here's who all can do what. And again, sometimes I said that we were learning things every couple of weeks. I feel like COVID could kind of put a little twist on it, so we have to reevaluate every week and say, is this still working?
Just to piggyback off of that from Shanell, you know, we're talking about early childhood programming, which is many different state departments or many different aspects of early childhood. And one of the things, and she'll agree and she'll nod on this, I know, is we've opened a line of communication, because if a parent reaches out to Department of Human Services or Child Care Resource and Referral or my agency or many other state agencies or Early Childhood Iowa and says, I need help getting Wi-Fi, we really have been communicating to try to get those resources to parents, because it is very unique to the family situation. But everyone has really gone above and aboard to talk to each other and to identify those areas that people need help in, and help fix the problem and redirect people. So if you know of any family that is struggling with whatever their situation is, their local ECI, their child care resource and referral, the Department of Human Services, they just need to place the call, even if they don't know who to call, because there really is a lot of creative solutions going on, or problem solving happening.
Grace, before you move on, I just had another thought of another partner that I did not mention that I'm also learning about, that I think also help with that parent role, is the libraries.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so in any size community, but I'm really seeing it in some rural communities, if there's a way that the library can help with the Wi-Fi issue or that kind of thing, they have been more flexible with some of their hours, that in those smaller communities, to say, this is how we can assist that family who may not have access right now, or is in transition, you know, however they're doing it. I'm hearing and learning more about some strategies where libraries are part of that conversation, and they're figuring out how they can help as well. When the weather was nice, I learned a lot about libraries that had taken their Wi-Fi boundary and extended it all around their building and had picnic tables and things like that. So when the weather was good, you could get their Wi-Fi and still be outside. So when you think about that, that's really creative. And now when we're thinking about that, it's like a high of 38 or something. I think it was 38 this morning when I was outside. Okay, that doesn't quite work. So now they're reevaluating and looking at something different.
We have another audience question. The state program for 4-year-olds through the public schools provides a minimum of 10 hours a week and funds the program at about $3,500 per kid per year. What would you change about that program?
Thanks for the chat for the question, Senator. It's a good question. I don't think we have enough time to really just kind of think about that in depthly. We think that definitely after having 10 to 12 years now of statewide voluntary preschool, it's a part of our early childhood system. And we just have to continue to figure out how do we not keep, or how do we prevent the statewide voluntary preschool operating in a silo. So when you think about those comments about all of the partnerships that are needed to support that family and that child that's 4, to have the continuity to still have the care that they need all day for those parents that need that who are working.
I think that's the largest struggle that is kind of in our wheelhouse, at least over here at Iowa AYC, is the wraparound care or the before and after school care to those programs, and the transportation issues or things like that, and how to continue on with quality and consistency of services and still have a place for kids to go.
We've talked a lot about community partnerships, but how would people, if someone wants to try to partner together to start some early childhood programming in their community, how would they actually go about that? What does that look like?
Well, first of all, Jillian mentioned Child Care Resource and Referral. They receive both federal and state dollars and are charged with helping individuals that want to provide childcare, and they are helping with regulatory, helping DHS with quality things, and they also then can assist with or help individuals, like if they're ready or wanting more education, they would refer them to Jillian's organization. I'll let you talk about that, Jillian. Just to reiterate again how that would work for individuals that are wanting to provide and improve their quality of care and as they work with young children.
So in that aspect, if a community decided that they wanted to establish a larger childcare center or incentivize more home providers, they might connect with us to be part of our Teach or Wages program, depending on where they're at. But the Teach program would then help people go to school and would also reward them to stay working there and have a commitment with the center or as a home provider, kind of a contract to increase education. They would get a larger stipend for that so that they could be more sustainable and as a childcare provider. And I'm sure that Shanell might be talking about this too, but beyond childcare resource and referral, it's kind of important to find out what community initiatives are going on. If somebody wants to establish more childcare or have identified that there's an issue, Iowa Women's Foundation that we partner with, both of us quite a bit, has gone in and done community conversations about identifying barriers in a community, and childcare often surfaces. Their view is more what is preventing women for having self-sustenance in the community, but often lack of childcare surfaces in the community as just a community issue. And we can't discount businesses. Talking to businesses in a community, they often will say there's things with retention in their employment, or they're finding out people are late for work at a certain shift, and it will drag it back to childcare or lack of childcare. Maybe there's a gap in shift work or childcare during a shift or things like that. So finding out who all the players are in a community and them establishing where their issues are helps draw in which partners we need to solve that.
I want to follow up on that. There are some amazing results happening. Communities are coming together. Their local economic groups, their Iowa Women's Foundation. So what they're doing is saying, okay, what kind of collaborations do we need? So if they've identified that childcare is a gap, or that there are individuals that want to try it, they're looking at it in a little different, a little more business approach and saying, okay, what do we need to have happen? So for example, in Southeast Iowa and Fairfield, there's a great partnership there that they are building a new center. And that was funded all with donations and primarily from the business sector and philanthropic. Iowa Women's Foundation, the economic group, the Early Childhood Iowa groups are working together there. Another example that's really creative is in Southwest Iowa, very rural. They realized they wanted to figure out how to keep families in those counties, and they are doing a coalition of child care centers. So they're building more of, if this needs this, if this needs this, you know, we're working together as centers and operating more of a standard price for families. And if they are driving by here, does it make more sense to go to this child care center logistically than the other one that was a tad bit cheaper before? Another strategy that they're looking at, I don't know if they've employed it quite yet, but they are looking at how do we do a shared services approach? Will we get a better deal on paper towels, cleaning supplies, fiscal assistance, you know, anything that they could do shared, and would they get a better rate on that? So I think there's a lot of creative strategies to promoting all types of early childhood work. So the ones I just mentioned are more in childcare, but they're also in Muscatine, they created kind of an old, I want to say it was like a small mall, and they have created an early childhood center. So whether you need health care, mental health, child care is in there. There's a preschool room. Everything in that little old mall now is all geared towards any type of early childhood service that you could think of. So again, really across the gambit. So those are some really creative, unique, neat things happening.
Well, a while ago, we mentioned, we were talking about how families may be struggling with childcare and early childhood education during the pandemic. Kids are at home, everyone's working from home. Bosses might not be okay with all that. How can businesses better understand families' needs and in the end, maybe retain employees through this pandemic?
Are you ready, Jillian?
No, you go ahead and start and I'll piggyback.
I'll share what I'm learning. More and more of them are starting, depending on how big they are, the company. One of the things I'm learning about is they actually ask their employees and are having conversations. Sometimes it's not a conversation, sometimes it's a survey. And so we have examples of surveys that businesses are utilizing to learn more from their employees about the work habits, things that are shifting, what might be helpful, and then determining what they can or cannot do. And I think that many of them are seeing that if we could be a little more flexible with this, we'll actually have better results. And so I'll start with that one.
Yeah, I think it's important what Shanell said. We found out in many of these conversations that the CEO and the HR department didn't talk about retention, and that the HR folks might know why the employee is leaving at a more intimate level than what the CEO does. And so we are finding all kinds of creative solutions from businesses. There was some situations where a 15-minute shift change made all the difference in the world, where the shifts overlapped because mom or dad or whoever was going to work and the next childcare provider or adult in the home was also, leaving work. And so that shift change made a huge impact. We have seen companies that will reserve a slot so that a childcare center in the community can have a sustained income, predictable income to run their business. And the employees there get the preference of having that slot. And sometimes it's in homes and in centers so that those families still have some choice, but they have a certain amount of paid slots. We have seen the companies incentivize one of the programs like the teacher wages, make that commitment and help that happen so that the providers are gaining more income so that they can work with the company. We have seen businesses give stipends for childcare as a benefit to employees. So there's all kinds of creative problem solving going on with the businesses.
Exactly. Another example, Grace, it's down in just southern Iowa, and I can't think of the name of the town, Centerville. There was a business owner that took an old school and helped make that not only childcare, but preschool. So again, when we talked about earlier issues with transportation, you know, that took that completely out of the argument, because basically that child can be there all day now. So the parent can work, and it's not available. I mean, it's available to more than just the parents of that business. It's been a huge community support. And so, but again, developmentally and educationally, it helps that child to be in that same environment. And they took away some of the issues that were that parents' issues for working, and really supported them.
Shanell mentioned shared services earlier, and that's really a huge place where some of the businesses can come in. Maybe they can do the payroll for a child care center, or maybe the food service from a senior citizens center of some type can do the food for the child care center. So there's all types of different things. Maybe it's just having maintenance provided from a business to keep the center up and running, or lawn care or things like that. So there's many different partnerships where we hear from businesses, we don't want to run a child care center. That's not our business. They don't have to. And that's the beauty. But if they want to and take that on, they certainly can, with guidance from some of the other partners as well.
I have one more answer to that, because it just made me think of another example. And I think examples of creativity kind of help your conversation, or anything these audience is thinking about or being a part of in your community. And this is an urban example. In Waterloo area, they have had a business and child care coalition. That's not the name. I can't remember the exact name. But they have had this coalition existing for quite some time. And they are now creating new child care centers in areas that make sense in their city, so that it's traffic patterns, it's near these larger businesses, that kind of thing. And another one that they've had that has been really cool is and there's a couple of these across our state, but one of them that's really successful is they are partnering with the elderly home. And in the elderly home, there is, I don't think it's a full wing. I think it's their own separate little building. But in Audubon, Iowa, it is a wing of the elderly home. And so they are having those youngest children interact with the older individuals and finding positive results. And so there's just lots of creative things that are happening, and saying what makes more sense. And that might be one of those positive things from COVID. We're taking time to say, what makes better sense for us right now?
Yeah, that is interesting and kind of ingenious. So what are some of the funding challenges that comes with early childhood education, and what are some of those funding streams as well?
Oh, I saw that. I remembered you told us that question.
I'm going to talk about the challenge real quick, and then I'm going to let Shanell talk about all the streams. But because we're talking about early childhood programs, and we're looking at different state departments with funding and also different federal, I think the largest challenge is aligning all those services to be the most fiscally sensitive and also provide all the services for children and families that they need. So, federally, you're talking about many different playgrounds, I say, when you're talking about and advocating for funding to come down to the state to work with, but then also how those align and hand off.
So one of the things that I, again, love about Iowa is that we have Early Childhood Iowa, and I love working for it. When you talk about it, Grace, we actually are partnering more and more all the time at the state level. And we do have multiple funding streams, especially when you think about it beyond just an education type approach. So we partner with public health, human services, education, human rights, workforce development, and economic development. Anywhere that they have any type of funding or programming that impacts families with young children or young children directly. So we are working and partnering more and more with family pediatricians and family doctors programs, because maybe they're working with public health on a program and they see a family with needs. They now know how to refer them to a service that's available to them in early childhood. We are addressing and having communications because we're also now having more integrated data systems, so we can make sure services are getting to the families that need them, but also what are we doing to be the best stewards of those funds and not being duplicative, and improving our quality without improving the cost, or at a minimal rate, because we're spreading it out across multiple programs. We love that we are able to do that. In that vein, I would share that we are partnering with legislative services agencies. So if a policymaker has a question, we can assist that staffer and the policymaker to say, have you thought about this? This makes sense here. We've thought through this one. That one has these ramifications possibly that you wouldn't have thought of, because it'll also impact this other program. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I really like, again, and usually when we share this, we have the picture of the Iowa silos, of various grain bin silos, and we are trying to break those down. And it doesn't happen overnight, but it's stronger now than it ever was, of saying we have got to use our resources wisely, and we partner together.
And even though that presents a challenge, I would say the flip side of that it is an opportunity. As budgets are volatile, there's that partnership where somebody else can pick up and hand off, services.
So we have about 10 minutes left. We're going to take one last audience question. Only about 70% of Iowa 4-year-olds are being reached, and the percentage was about 10 points lower for minority and low income kids. So the kids who need early childhood education more on average were the ones less likely to be reached. What do those numbers look like now? Do you agree with these numbers, especially with the underserved populations?
Thanks for the question. I'll start on that. I would share, when in 2019, Early Childhood Iowa completed a needs assessment, a comprehensive needs assessment for young children. And Herman, some of the data, some of the numbers, I don't know if those are the exact percentages, but definitely we saw that same concern. So data does confirm that our statewide voluntary preschool does. How do we do a better job of reaching those at-risk populations, the minority? How do we make it more accessible? And so as the local Early Childhood Iowa boards are partnering with school districts, and they are helping think of strategies, and they're looking at different strategies for recruitment into that 4-year-old program, so that they can reach more of the populations you mentioned in your question. That's one strategy. I know others or advocates are working together to think about, do we need to have some type of legislation that says, versus just making universal, do we need to target some more of those populations? I also think we're having conversations with the Department of Education to say, how could we do that? And the Early Childhood Iowa way is we usually nudge, incentivize, and that kind of thing. And so I think it's just definitely one of those that we can improve upon in our early childhood system.
As far as our agency's concerned, is we don't really impact that system, but we look at where are those children at. If they're not in the voluntary system, they're probably in some form of childcare, and how can we impact the quality of that care and the education that they're receiving in those environments? Because early childhood education happens in home childcare, family childcare, and in childcare centers, and often by certified teachers or teachers degreed in early childhood. So how can we impact that system? So if they aren't participants in the universal pre-K, that they still enter kindergarten ready to learn and ready to progress with their peers.
Great
Right.
addition,
Well,
Jillian.
yeah,
Sorry.
Shanell, Jillian, do you have any final comments before we wrap up the panel?
Well, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Yesterday, or recently, I think it was yesterday, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation just put out another report. This one is an essential industry for the economic recovery. And if you haven't read from the U.S. Chamber Foundation, the economic impact on Iowa report that came out about February of last year, you should do that. We think about childcare as good for children and families, but as an economic issue in Iowa, childcare really impacts our ability to have a workforce, to retain a workforce, to attract businesses, and to keep our people here in Iowa, which are all goals. And so I just want to thank you for the opportunity to elevate the issues around early childhood and for asking us to participate, and also nudge for people to look at it that way as well.
So my final thoughts are, thank you for attending this workshop and letting us share. I would encourage any of you, a lot of these of your names I don't know. And so my encouragement to you is, if you're not already, join a local IAYC chapter, look into or partner or become a local Early Childhood Iowa board member. Third is there are child care center boards that always need volunteers to help them. And school boards. And if you're on a school board, think about early childhood and how that school could strengthen. So there are lots of opportunities at a local level. Those are just 4 that I came up with that you could be a part of and help us with strengthening Iowa in this way.
All right. Well, thank you, Shanell and Jillian, for joining us and talking about early childhood education. And thank you to the audience for your insightful questions. The next session in the education track is Closing the Opportunity Gap, which is at 11:15. And I will also be moderating that one. And if you would like to further the conversation or have any questions for our panelists, you can direct message speakers through the Whova app. And you can also hop over to the networking rooms and connect with other attendees. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Grace.
Thank you all.